All right, today we are joined by Rick Jaye of Business Transition Advisors, and then Zach Hamilton, fellow advisor here at Alterra. My name is Josh Whalen. I'm one of the advisors here at Alterra as well. Gentlemen, thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Josh,
Happy
for
to
the
be here.
opportunity.
Yeah, so if you are a business owner and somebody thinking about how am I going to transition my business to whoever the next person is going to be, maybe you're ready to step away and travel the world, maybe you're ready to volunteer, use all your time for that purpose. Maybe you're just ready to hand the keys over to somebody else. But if that's a topic you have found yourself thinking of, this is for you. So Rick Jaye's business, Business Transition Advisors, is a company that focuses on and expertly specializes in how business owners can transition ownership in a smart way. And specifically today, we're going to talk about a strategy that they are foremost experts in called an ESOP. So Rick's going to explain what that is here shortly. But Zach, this is a topic that comes up for us as advisors. But this is a deep dive into a topic that we don't facilitate. So why are we talking about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so first off, I view us as the generalist, saying we want to look at the whole puzzle of someone's financial picture and figure out what they're missing and how we can, solve that problem for them. So sometimes those are tools that we have in our back pocket that are really easy to integrate that we can handle on our own. ESOP is one of those, I would say, more specialized tools that is a fantastic potential tool for the right client, but we don't do that all in-house. We can't do that all ourselves, and that's why we bring in specialists like Rick. So when you hear the same problem from clients multiple times, which is, I've got this business, I don't want to be running this business 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is from now. I care about my employees. I know there's a big tax problem. I know there's a transition issue. What do I do? ESOP is one of those tools that comes to mind to say, hey, this might be a solution. And I love the way that Rick talks about it. It's not the answer for everybody, but for the right people, it's a fantastic answer to that issue. So that's why we're here. That's why we're talking through this. And Rick, again, thanks for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about ourselves a lot of times as the hub on a wheel. And so some of the spokes extend toward things that we help facilitate and that we actually hands-on do. And then some of those spokes go out to things where it requires other resources. So whether that's tax planning, estate planning, business transition planning. So our extended network of folks, Rick, like you, is one of the things that sets Alterra apart for our clients. So yeah, we're just heaping on the thanks for being here. Rick, we have a list of questions. We may get to all of them. We may not get to all of them. But if you're watching this video directly, make sure to look for the link in the description to an article that we collaborated on that kind of goes through some of the basics of what an ESOP is, who it's appropriate for, and so on. And then obviously, if you're getting to this video through the article, you may have seen that already. But Rick, we'll go through some of these questions, but if you don't mind, just kind of share a little bit about yourself, your company. Why is this a business that you're in? And anything you feel relevant there.
I appreciate it. Well, first off, I would say that I have the privilege of working with a lot of firms and a lot of advisors around the country that service and provide value to their clients. But your firm and just the way you guys handle yourselves, just the brief introductions, the way that you communicated just this topic is a testament to the quality of what you guys do. So thank you for this opportunity and thank you for the privilege of helping serve you and serve your clients. As far as background on myself, I guess I'd start off by saying, I'm now 65 years old. I've been in the industry since I first got out of graduate school and started out as an analyst and, kind of migrated my way and wanted more client-facing opportunities and, was privileged enough to be involved in starting up, founding, being an executive of a number of firms and kind of where I am today and why I'm with BTA. It's a long story, but to make it very short, I've been involved in 3 different sale transactions of companies I was involved in. Sold one to a public company, sold one to a private equity firm, was involved in a company as a founder where we took the company public. So, I had experienced what owners experience on a day-to-day basis of building, running, and operating companies. And I think that makes sort of myself, somewhat unique in the exit planning or transition planning world, because I've sat in an owner's shoes. I've dealt with the stress of running a company, having to meet payroll, having to meet overhead, sometimes at the own sacrifice of yourself and your own family. Because, one thing that if you've not been involved in owning a business and starting a business, it's hard to really understand is how much true pressure that you're under because you're actually putting people that work for you above yourself. And it takes a unique and special person to really do that and do it effectively. Not suggesting I did, because not all companies were overly successful, but the foundation was that I always cared about the people that worked for me and took the responsibility to treat them in a way that was very unique. And that led me to where we are today with BTA, because having sold companies through other mechanisms, and those were done at the right time for the right reasons, but I really hadn't become knowledgeable of truly what an ESOP was. I knew it to some degree. I knew that there were tax benefits associated with it, but until I actually met Roy Farmer, who was one of the founders of Business Transition Advisors in around 2014, I really hadn't put a lot of effort or thought into understanding what an ESOP was, because I'd done the three other theoretical transitional options that were out there, and I saw the good and the bad and the ugly that was associated with those. And as I said, and I think, Zach, you were very elegant in the way you suggested that an ESOP is great, but it's not for all parties. There is no perfect strategy that is the diamond in the rough that fits all scenarios. It really gets down to the specifics of the objectives that the clients are really trying to achieve. But the concept as an advisor and the responsibility that you guys have, which is, just absolutely an incredible weight on the shoulders of advisors that are working with business owners, is understanding the fact that succession or exit planning is absolutely critical. And it's part of the foundation of when you start a business. You really should, when you start it, look at what that ultimate succession strategy can be. Not that you formalized it, but you need to understand it, whether it's, in your case, just putting buy-sell agreements together when you've got partners during the building of the business. So that in case something happens to a partner, that you've got a foundation of some liquidity that allows you to have the ability of buying out that partner in a case of disability or death. But that's part of what I consider to be the foundation of successful planning. And you guys do that every day. The kind of the end of the game of final exit planning is a part of that. But when I talk to business owners, it's not about exiting, because a lot of them want to stick around. I mean, I'm 65. I'm never going to retire. I will work till the day I die. One, because I love it. I enjoy working with advisors and helping their clients to achieve tremendous sort of end of the road success, and watching what they've built and the legacy that they're trying to perpetuate continue. And so the options that you want to look at, and there's only four of them in the world of succession or exit planning, all have different strengths and weaknesses. I specialize in ESOPs, but BTA as an exit planning or succession planning can do really any of the strategies. But for myself, I specialize in ESOPs. The reason being, because of my background and what I've done, and at my age now, to me, it's more about the way I describe it is doing well by doing good. It's more about what I can help people do to achieve more of a socialistic benefit. And there's no question, when you sell a business, it's a windfall benefit financially to the selling shareholders. And ESOPs are no different than that. But the byproduct is an owner that considers an ESOP over a M&A transaction, hiring an investment banking team that takes it to market, shops it to the highest bidder, negotiates the best price, or even a management buyout. And relatively, does a privately owned company have an option of ultimately going public? That's a small minority in the industry. But those other options is what owners really want to focus on and look at as an option. But in the ESOP world, the reason I really focus on that is I find that owners that I work with, it's more about the legacy of the business and watching that business continue to be perpetuated in the community. It's about rewarding in ways for their employees that they really consider family and team members, that they can give them something they otherwise could never afford to give them because of the nature of how ESOPs work, and let them participate in the success and the continued growth of the company, while at the same time still receiving the full economic reward of the sale of the business. So it's, that I know the cliche of win-win-win is overused often in our industry and in every industry, but it's truly the mechanism that supports an owner to achieve their personal objectives and family planning work that you guys are able to help them with, from charitable planning to gift planning for kids and grandkids, to personal liquidity planning to do the kind of things, every owner deserves the second vacation home, what I call it, the depreciable assets, the planes, trains, automobiles, and boats that don't make good long-term investments, but are fun to drive, fun to run, and fun to enjoy. And so they deserve to be rewarded in such a way that they can take advantage of that. But at the same time, they care about the business. They want to see it perpetuated, and many times they don't want to leave. They're
Hmm.
like me. They're passionate about what they do. They also have a wife that loves the fact that they work hard and continue to travel so that they can spend time doing the things they want without the interference of somebody sitting around the household and looking for things to do. So,
Not that that's a personal story or anything.
well, I tried to retire
Sounds
when
like that hit close to home, Rick.
Yeah.
well, and my wife said, you need to get your butt back on the road and go out and be productive because I don't want you sitting around the house. And with a bad back that I've got, there's only so much golf I can play. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, one of the reasons I love conversations like this, and I'm sure, Zach, you can chime in if based on how this resonates with you, but we don't hear of a lot of people who started a business that grew to success and are looking to transition it as people who are like, hey, get me out of here. I'm ready for my useful life to be over. And so the fact that, the experience you just recounted resonates with every story of every business owner I've ever talked to, which is I'm ready to transition this for some reason, but it has nothing to do with me thinking my useful life is over. I'm probably
right.
on to the next idea. I want to stay involved. I just, I've the tension of how long can I continue to do this in my current role in a healthy way that respects the legacy of the business. I want this business to last generations beyond me. Um, but I'm not, you're not getting rid of me. I'm not going anywhere. That type of a thing.
That's where the ESOP effectively can be a wonderful transition. Because what I explain to owners and the management team is the day after you actually sell to the employees through an ESOP transaction, nothing changes.
Yeah.
Unlike if you sell to a private equity or strategic buyer, where they bring in their own management team, certain people in the company are going to be within a very short time frame or given severance packages, and they're losing their jobs. And that's, as an owner myself, I experienced that. I saw the impact it had on the families that entrusted me when they first came to work for the firms I was part of, and it was emotionally devastating to me to live with that, knowing that I had positively impacted somebody's life on one hand, but on the other hand, now I was damaging their life. And for some of these people at my age, at 65, if I were an employee working for a company and now all of a sudden I lose my job because they sell out to a private equity or strategic
Hmm.
buyer, I don't know at 65 if I could get another job. And I've been fortunate, but a lot of employees, and that's part of what I think we're going to talk about, is why Congress has enacted laws to support the various benefits to support ESOPs. The byproduct is many people in society, unfortunately, aren't prepared for retirement from a financial
Hmm.
perspective, that are the typical employee that works for a company, and therefore, if they lose their jobs, it may be difficult to replace the income that they've got. And it's, as an owner, that is hard to live with if you are of that mindset. And there's nothing wrong with selling a company to a private
Sure.
equity strategic buyer. It fits in the circumstances for many clients. But for owners that focus more on those aspects that we're talking about now, the emotional, the objective side, the focus of the business and the employees and the commitment you make to those people, if that's the driving force, then the ESOP is something that at least needs to be evaluated as one of the options, to look at it and then evaluate it from an economic perspective to provide that comparison, and evaluate it from the other side, which is, do I want to stick around? And if I do want to leave, then possibly do I have a management team that can run the business on a day-to-day basis and allow me to take that step back? Because I do deserve, as a business owner, to take time off, to travel, to play golf, to sail, to do whatever I want to do, to live the life that I choose to live at this point in time. And an ESOP is an effective strategy from that perspective, if you have that management team that not all firms have, which is one reason why in those circumstances, when they don't and the owner wants to leave and wants to separate, that's when the M&A and the investment banking
Hmm.
transaction has merit and makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's a perfect segue. So let's do some maybe some rapid fire on ESOPs kind of from a technical perspective. And I'll acknowledge we've been talking for a handful of minutes here, and I've already broken one of our chief rules, which is explain an acronym before you just start saying it. So I've already violated this. So, Rick, if you don't mind, briefly describe an ESOP, including what does it stand for, and why do you like this strategy uniquely, or have chosen to specialize in that,
Yeah.
in kind of the elevator version of it.
Perfect first question. So, and with my long-winded introduction, I probably got off track. It didn't allow you to interrupt me to do that. But ESOP, ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. And it's important in the world of advisory that we make that distinction, because a lot of advisors that don't have the background immediately say, oh, I'm familiar with it. I know about employee stock option plans. And so it's not a strategy that is typically deployed and used in the public arena, although there are some public companies that do have ESOPs as we speak of them and work with them. But employee stock ownership plan is a qualified retirement plan. It's a defined contribution plan by design, no different than a 401k profit sharing, a 401k profit sharing plan. So it falls under all the qualified rules. Hence, it has certain tax benefits, but it's designed as a retirement plan. No different, as we talked about, than a 401k profit sharing plan. The difference in an ESOP, though, is it is non-contributory, typically. So it's all corporate funded. So it's a benefit the corporation is funding on behalf of the employees. And the nature of how it's funded is in the form of a contribution that allows stock that is owned by the ESOP to be released on an annual basis to the employees. That's important to understand, because if I were to own a company, and Josh, you and Zach were employees of the company, and I basically grant you stock in the company, which is possible to do. The problem is now you've received a benefit that has an economic value, and you have a current taxation tied to that. Also, as an owner, when you grant stock directly to somebody, immediately they now are a shareholder and have what they call minority shareholder rights. So they can access all the financials in the company. They can then have potential voting responsibilities. So they can start directing, even though they're minority shareholders, they can theoretically have power and direction over the company. When we do it through an ESOP transaction, forgetting about the fact we're actually doing so by selling stock to the ESOP to pay out owners for the value. I'll get into that next. But the byproduct of an ESOP is employees don't directly own the stock. The ESOP owns the stock on their behalf as a retirement plan. They're entitled to an allocation of stock depending on how we are allocating stock, whether it's on a percentage of compensation or it's another formula tying length of service with comp and other factors based on that. But simple way to think of it is just like a profit sharing plan, where it's a function of compensation, your comp to the overall comp of all the employees. And that percentage is the amount of stock you get released to you each and every year. The benefit, though, is as you're receiving stock benefits, since it's in a qualified retirement plan, you have no current taxation as a participant. So the accumulation over time, stock builds up in your account. It's part of your retirement benefit. And ultimately, when you retire and there's a repurchase of the stock back from the company, and you get this cash payout equal to what the stock is worth, you can roll it over and then manage your own assets in a rolled over IRA account, or you can take it as a taxable distribution. Those are the benefits that you have as an employee. The byproduct of that is you have something called a beneficial interest. You don't directly own it. You're entitled to the benefit, which is the equivalent of what the value of that retirement benefit is worth. The positive for the business owner in this perspective is they still have the control over the nature of the company, and they're not sharing any additional information with you as an ESOP participant who has stock allocated to you than they do today as a participant in a 401k or profit sharing plan. So hence, you have no voting responsibilities or voting rights. You have no liability responsibilities, which is important as a participant, because shareholders, when they directly own companies, have personal liability potentially tied to their ownership in that company, as at least it relates to payroll tax responsibilities, and maybe some debt responsibilities. So you have no personal liability tied to that, and you have no current taxation on those benefits. So the ESOP.
As an owner, then it sounds to me like this is a way I can transition ownership of the company without just kind of getting rid of all the reins.
Absolutely. The flexibility of that and the control you maintain, and, gets back to understanding corporate law.
Yeah.
And in every state in this country, as a shareholder, shareholders have bosses. Uh,
Hmm.
excuse me, executives of companies have bosses. The executive of a company, as a CEO, has a boss. It's the board of directors of the company. In private companies, typically the shareholder is also the executive, who is also the board.
Yeah.
So when you sell to an ESOP, there is somewhat of a change because now the shareholder is the ESOP, and the ESOP is operated by a trustee. The trustee does not sit on the board and legally cannot sit on the board. So the executive now is usually the ex-shareholder while they continue to operate and run the company. And then ultimately they report to the board. The board of directors is typically made up of the selling shareholders of the company, along with a nominated outside board member,
Mm.
typically somebody who can help, who knows the board, who knows the prior ownership, and is somebody who's got a background either in ESOPs or has a background in business operations as a consultant or as a professional board member that can give guidance to the board and governance.
That's interesting because, and Zach, maybe you can chime in here on how you've seen this meet some of those needs that the concerned business owner has. Because, again, at the end of the day, like one of the big misconceptions that I hear when people talk about very successful business owners is how much money do you really need? Why are you still that type of a thing. And what they fail to realize is this is not about, it's not about the money. They want the money's a nice byproduct of it, but they have a vision, a mission, something that they're compelled to build in large part, especially the type of person that we're talking about. Our
Yeah.
client, oftentimes, probably most of the time, I can't think of a single exception actually to this, Zach. You can correct me if I'm wrong. They don't wear their wealth on their sleeve. They
Right.
don't really actually they would worry if people knew the wealth that they have because they don't want it to define them. They want to be able to relate to anybody at any level of economic scale and so on. So Zach, how has this come into play in terms of helping the business owner who's thinking legacy oriented? How has this helped accomplish that end for them?
I think of a specific situation where talking to the client, and the question that was asked was, would it be an acceptable outcome for you to get a large chunk of cash today for your business to walk away right off into the sunset, and then for the business to fail or get cut up for parts, or right, for you to not have any control over that happening? And his answer was unequivocally, no, that's not an option. That's a non-starter, because it was so directly, like, there's literally family members and then people that are not family but have been with the business for 20 years. And it's like, I cannot
Yes.
walk away from those people and their success. But also, 10 years from now, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing in this role. So it's, how do you do those things? But also in that case, it's 100% owner that has had the control of all of the reins for a long time. And so to just give up those reins is kind of a non-starter
Yeah.
too. So that's where the ESOP can be a really cool kind of check all boxes. What Rick was saying, a win-win-win. We're in, as a team, we're in reading Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, read the Stephen Covey book, and talk about win-win or no deal. And this is, I think, a really fun way to say, well, this is an opportunity to potentially create a win for the business owner transitioning, a win for the employees in a way that they maybe had no idea the benefit that that could represent, and a win from a tax transition perspective. And Rick, you can dive deeper into that. Maybe is just the tax ramifications of a qualified plan compared to just a, hey, let's walk away with our chunk of cash, and the power that can come with some of the ESOP transition. I think is a really cool way to do a win-win or win-win-win. And that's and like you said, Josh, we don't often see clients that say, my goal is to just have the biggest pot of money at the end, right? It's, I want to leave legacy. I want to make an impact. Here's the way that I did that in my business while I was working, but I can't do that forever. How do I keep that impact
And
going?
and the reluctance to give up the reins, in my experience anyway, isn't a power hungry thing. It's a concern about I
Care
want to
about the
take care of these
people.
people,
Totally.
and actually I don't think just throwing them the reins is the best way to take care of them. So Rick, it's interesting hearing you describe kind of that transition process where it's now, the ownership of the company is out of the hands of the prior shareholders, and yet they're still sitting in an advisory capacity with decision-making ability to ensure that the operations are continuing in the right direction. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's and that's part of the foundation of where it makes sense is an owner that
Hmm.
wants to stick around. I would say half of the transactions owners have no interest in ever walking away completely,
Hmm.
but they'd like to have a little bit more time. And one of the very natural aspects of a ESOP, because if you think about it, you're helping to create an ownership mindset among your employees that are within the company. And so studies have shown within the industry that once you do an ESOP, the company's growth rate increases by around 3.5 to between 3.5 and 4.3% per year. That's studies that have been done by the Bisis Institute at UC San Diego, or Ohio State's graduate program that has an ESOP employee ownership platform and program.
Hmm.
Rutgers University has a very similar one. These universities, through part of the research they do, study what the impact is to the aspects of doing ESOPs and how it changes the company, the growth rate, and the nature of the quality of what ultimately is the output is of these companies. And it's simple if you think about it. If every employee now thinks like owners, how do I focus on growth? How do I focus on margin expansion?
Yes.
How do I improve customer service? In the construction or manufacturing world, how do I focus on safety to mitigate and minimize workman's comp claims, all that affect the bottom line? Because now they're all directly benefiting from the increasing stock value growth,
Hmm.
basically helping the company increase its natural EBITDA or net profit levels, which is what drives stock value. The more they focus and the more they improve in a cultural environment within the company, the greater the stock value goes that they're now direct beneficiaries or recipients of.
The
That's
interesting thing too about that is somebody might understand all the accounting and all the ratios of how this activity, X activity leads to Y increase in profit. They may also not understand any of that based on their role or their skill set, but they still can have an owner's mindset. If somebody has said, we've deemed you uh, worthy, essentially, to own part of this company and to be responsible for stewarding its outcomes, you just think differently. You just think differently. It,
that's the perfect word, Josh. You use stewarding,
yeah.
and I think that carries weight, regardless of the religious behavior you may have or
Yeah.
beliefs. You are a steward of that business, and you're creating a stewardship environment among everybody that works within that organization.
So, Rick, maybe give a brief overview of a few candidates that you see as good profiles for an ESOP.
Yeah. So, again, we talked about the sort of, and Zach, you did a great job of describing the philosophy. From a philosophical standpoint, assuming the clients meet the financial profile, which is at least $2 million of EBITDA, ideally growing at a quality positive growth rate per year, at least 20 employees. Those are really the financial foundations of a company. The rest is the emotional side. I care about my employees. I care about my management team. I want to see the legacy of the business continue. I'm going to stick around for a period of time while I build out my management team, or I'll hire somebody to run it as I want to exit, or I've already got a management team that can operate and run the company. And I care about my community and my customers. That's the philosophical from a from a from a business perspective of who is the best candidates. ESOPs are typically done in areas in the industry where private equity is less involved. Because if you're a software company, you're selling in the private equity world, if you're privately owned, for multiples of revenue. Even unprofitable companies are selling at very high multiples. Since an ESOP is a leverage transaction, we're actually borrowing money against the value of the business, and we're financing that out of the cash flow of the company. We need positive cash flow, hence we need profitability. So industries where the multiples that can be adequate as fair market that you could sell in the ESOP world at the same multiple that you'd sell to any other buyer, construction, manufacturing, services. Those are really the foundations of where we see you think about the bread and butter, the middle American companies that are working, that owners have built these companies as CNC machinists. They were good at what they did. They started by buying one machine. They got a manufacturing contract. They got into the building of that. They hired another friend. They bought another machine. They ultimately went from their garage to a warehouse. They built out a very successful business. They're now doing injection molding or thermal molding or I mean, or a, general contractor, it's building homes that expands into the commercial space. Those businesses are the foundation of where ESOPs belong.
Mm,
Because in reality, those businesses are going to sell between 4 and 6 times multiples. If a company sells for higher than 7 or 8 multiples, they're probably a stretch to validate an ESOP, simply because when you're looking at financing, there's not enough cash flow to cover the cost within a reasonable period of time. And,
makes
and my
sense. Okay.
concept of reasonableness is if it takes you longer than 12 years to pay off the purchase of the company, it's probably either not the right industry or the price of the company is too high to validate that kind of scenario. Because at 65, we did an ESOP. BTA is the perfect example. I've always been a big believer you've got to be doing what you sell. And hence, when I joined the firm in 2016, I was pretty adamant we start an ESOP. When I became a partner, I forced the issue. And as of this past year, we actually became a 100% employee-owned company. So,
Wow.
and again,
That
it's
that's it's so important too. Business owners want to be around business owners. And so somebody who not only understands from an arm's length what you ought to do, I understand all the logistics, blah blah blah. They just are going to connect with you differently, or somebody like you who's gone, hey, yeah, I know the technical stuff, but I've been in the trenches, man. This is not light lifting. This is that, like, grind out that last rep lifting. Uh, and of course, as Zach knows, I only know weightlifting analogies. So, okay, we're not going to go down that rabbit trail, but some of them are limited in their application, let's just say. But if you've been under that weight and you're trying to drive it up, you know what that's like. And somebody goes, not only do I feel like you understand what I ought to do, what I should consider, but you've been there, and that is critical. And not only done that, but then walked through options, alternatives, and ended up selecting something you're compelled by that aligns with now what you're helping other people with. There are a lot of logistics, timelines, I'm sure costs and considerations, technical things. As I'm sure you would agree, none of us are formal tax advisors, and so we're not giving formal tax advice and signing tax returns and preparing legal documents and things like this. There may be some of those things that are part of the logistical process, but we can leave that to anybody who thinks this might be a viable option for them. We've got links to your company in the article. If you're watching the video here, make sure to check out that article. I'd like to do a quick look at a case study, Rick, if that's okay. So you graciously collaborated with us on an article to kind of help folks understand what this is, what it's not, who it's for, and so on. And by no means are we going to try to cover every single thing in one conversation. It's just too much. That said, you gave some helpful case studies here. So for anybody who wants to check this out, if you visit alteraadvisors.com/insights and visit the article section, you'll find this article linked. Zach, look at you, published author. Way to go. And Rick, thank you again for collaborating on this. So, we go through your guys' insights on what's an ESOP, who's a candidate, benefits and risks, and so on. But you gave us a couple of these case studies that I want to highlight here. So I'm just going to zoom in here. And so you talked about a few examples of companies that might be a good candidate or success story or something like that. So why don't we wrap with you just briefly walking us through this example of a concrete construction company? Sounds like it fits that construction, manufacturing services description. Walk us through the background, goal, kind of solution, and outcomes that you were able to or that might be achieved by somebody in this profile here.
Sure. So a common approach, this was a case where there were four shareholders of the company, relatively large company in the number of employees. Value of the company was $28 million when we did the transaction, and they were an S corporation. The byproduct in this case is the likelihood is they were in a state that didn't have a state income tax. The reason being is there's some significant tax benefits if you do the transaction as a C corp. And so because they did it as an S corp, that tells me that they were in a either low state tax rate location or a no state tax rate location like Nevada, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, North Dakota, Alaska, Washington. I think there's a couple others, but the byproduct is they stayed as an S corp when we did the transaction. The owner sold 100% of the company. They got some cash out of the transaction at closing, which was about $1.5 million. We typically want to get cash out. That's why we need a certain size company, because we usually go out and get bank financing. In this case, because of the work that they do, they're a heavy capital intensive business. If you're a concrete company, you've got cement loaders, you've got heavy trucks, you've got Caterpillar, John Deere front end loaders. So
it's what every 2-year-old boy dreams of.
Yes, absolutely. And if you ever have a chance to meet one of those, one of the things you want to ask him is, can you get up in one of those big Caterpillars and drive it for a little bit on a job site?
Yes, yeah.
But the point was, and what I'm trying to make here is, because they had so much debt already sitting on the balance sheet, it tells me that it was unlikely to get any additional cash financing upfront for takeout money, which is unusual. We want our clients usually to get a big chunk of cash at the sale price upfront, but in this case we didn't, because they already had a significant amount of debt on the balance sheet. But they did get $1.5 million of cash out at the time of closing. That was probably excess cash on the balance sheet. Because they were an S corp, they got it out non-taxable because it was part of their AAA. The byproduct is, if you go down to the benefits, they ultimately collected principal on their note, because they took back the balance in the form of a seller note of $26,500,000. That was paid to them over a 15-year period of time. That also tells me that they wanted long-term cash flow. And then, because of the nature of taking back a seller note, they qualified for a back-end equity kicker. So even though they sold 100% of the company up front for $28 million, they still controlled approximately 20% of the future equity value of the company through warrants. And those warrants ultimately had an estimated equity value of another $14.6 million. So without looking at the overall interest they collected as a note holder, they collected over $40 million in the form of their seller note, plus the warrants. It's actually $41.1 million on the sale of a $28 million company. Plus, again, I know that there's no calculation here for the interest, but if you look back and you say they took back over 15 years the $26.5 million seller note and at a 7% interest rate, if you do the math, they probably collected close to another $10 million in interest income. Again, that's about cash flow to the selling shareholders. Because some of the owners most likely retired when they sold the stock, and some may have stuck around and continued working. The key to how that debt gets paid off, and this is the important aspect of understanding the differences in the way an ESOP company works. If you're 100% ESOP owned S corporation, the company becomes completely tax exempt. So hence, if you look at the math, the company was projected to generate over $52 million in income tax savings as an S corporation owned ESOP company. If you do the math, it's very simple. Over the 15 years, we basically are buying the entire company, paying out the selling shareholders in the form of the total proceeds, including the warrants, purely out of the income tax savings that the company is going to be tax exempt. If you think about it, there's only two ways in America today you can be a tax-exempt for-profit company. One is being a credit union that is exempt from paying taxes. The other is being a 100% S corporation owned ESOP. The tax benefits, when you do the math, usually cover the obligation to pay off all the debt to buy the company when we're working with companies what we talked about before. The ideal company is a company that sells somewhere between 4 and a 7 multiple, because the cash flow that you're borrowing, both bank financing and any seller note financing, to pay that off at current interest rates, we're actually paying it off out of the tax savings. So it's a very efficient, very effective economic strategy. And through that process, it's a real simple point I make to owners. We're going to buy the company from you. We're going to pay you off out of the tax savings over the next 8 to 10. In this case, we're showing 15 years, simply because I'm assuming the owners wanted to wait. They wanted to get cash flow over a longer period of time, but we're paying you all of that out of the tax savings that's going to be derived for the company becoming an income tax-free organization over that period of time. So your choices are, you can pay $52 million in income taxes over the next 15 years, or we can take that money, put it in your pocket, and then give the company to the employees. What would you rather do? That's really as simple as the concept is. And what we didn't talk about in this discussion today is the other huge tax benefit is a personal tax benefit to the shareholder. If we go back to the top of this case study, if the client, instead of being an S corp, we did the transaction as a C corp, and if in turn the $28 million was all part of a stock sale subject to capital gain, because we find most owners, unless they bought the company later in life during the working cycle, most owners have a very small basis of their stock value.
Hmm.
The key in that case, and let's assume the client was in California, because it's easy to do that math. The client, from a capital gains standpoint, is in a 20% federal and 15.3% state. Plus, as a C corp, there's a 3.8% NIIT tax. So they're basically in around a 41% marginal bracket from a capital gains standpoint. Let's just round it off to 40%. So on a $28 million sale, 40% of that number is close to
1.2.
$11 million, if my math is right.
Math is hard.
Yeah, so I guess it would be 10.6 million would be the exact number. So on a $28 million sale, paying 10.6 million, if you just round it off to $10 million, the client's got $18 million after taxes. Again, most of our clients that can do the transaction that are in high tax states usually will do this. We'll structure it as a C corp. There's a lot of corporate reorganization that sometimes has to take place if they're not a C corp today, but that's part of the work that we do, is looking at what are the objectives of the client? Do they have charitable inclinations? I mean, this is really where Josh, you and Zach and the advisors come into play, because they know the personal requirements and objectives of the clients. We're trying to do the best job we can for the clients to make sure they maximize what they're due and how they can take advantage of the various provisions within the nature of how the ESOP is structured to take advantage of those opportunities, from mitigating or eliminating the capital gains tax personally to maximizing the tax-free nature of the structure of the business so that the company can meet its debt obligations and be a better working company on a non-taxable basis moving forward.
I mean, I don't think you could put a better bow on it, because really what you're talking about here, what's not here is names, faces, characteristics of any of these people. But when we, as advisors, all three of us looking at this, we think names, faces, families when we look at this stuff. And so we go, Joe and Jane Smith's business. I also know their kids. I know their aspirations. I know their charitable intentions. So really what we're talking about, when we talk about our mission here at Alterra, it's to help people unlock their wealth's potential to create a life and a legacy they love. And none of that has to do with none of it fundamentally is about this cool tax trick or whatever. It's about identifying the kind of the soul of a person and helping them align their wealth with the values and vision they have for their life, but then bringing in awesome partners that Rick, like you, who understand tips and tricks to maximize the ways that they can possibly do this. So we could, I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours more on this and how then it applies to charitable objectives or long-term family legacy and estate planning. But we can put a bow on this for now. If you're watching this and you have not checked out the article, please do that. And Rick, can you share just in case people are only watching the video here, where can people find you directly?
Yes, so our website is www.businesstransitionadvisors.com. And our website, it gives information about all of those in the company. It gives you information about what you guys did such a great job, and Zach, you did a great job in writing that article. And I have to give some kudos to Morgan Dryden on our team, who I know did some editing and provided some guidance on that. But
Absolutely.
the byproduct is, I think, that information is available to you. My contact information is pretty simple. It's my email is R for the first initial, my first name, last name, Jaye. So it's RJAYE at BTA, the initials of our company, .us.com. My phone number is 407-496-0205. We make ourselves available. My phone's always with me, so I take that call. In closing, what I would like to do is tell a very quick story, because I know I've taken up far too much of your time, but I think this is the perfect closing point to make. I did a transaction earlier this past year with a business owner I was introduced to by a wonderful advisor. Met the client talked about stewardship, talked about being a shepherd of the company, never really referred to the company as his own. He really said he was in a position to really shepherd and steward the company for the next group. We got brought into the transaction. We did a formal valuation of the business. The business valued at $120 million. That was the fair market value. The owner said, that's too much money. It's more than I deserve. It's more than I need. We did the transaction at a lot less than that. He left a tremendous amount of equity on the table. I said, well, why are you doing this? And he said, I feel it's an obligation that I have to the team that's helped me and my family have a financial windfall, not on this, but in life, far greater than I ever expected. And I've got more money now to do more than I ever anticipated doing anything with. And everything I get from the sale of the business is going into a charitable trust to benefit my community, charities that I support along with my church. And he said, but I have one request. I want to do this transaction in a way that my lowest paid employee in my company in the next 10 years will have over $1 million in their ESOP account. I want to enrich every employee in this company so when they retire, they will have a minimum of $1 million. And the first employee, who was one of the first that I hired when I've set up the company years before, is retiring in 10 years. And I want that employee to have $1 million or more in their account. We did the evaluation, we structured the transaction, again, not focusing on getting 120 million, but complying with what the owner wanted to get out of the transaction and structuring in a way that gave him that, and it all went into a charitable trust. But we designed it in a way that the lowest paid, but the closest to retirement employee at age 55, when they turn 65, would have over $1 million in their account. So here's the positive. Again, we did the transaction last year. The first year's stock value was provided on December 31. The stock value was already 120% over what we originally projected. So I said to the owner when we reported that, I said, there's a downside to what we did. We didn't meet our obligation. Your employee is going to have $2 million in their account at age 65 instead of the million. I mean, that's thinking about what you can do to change the lives of people. And this is an employee that makes about $60,000 a year. To give that employee, originally $1 million, now projected to be over $2 million in 10 years, that's a life-changing event impacting not only this owner's community, but impacting the lives in a positive way of every employee that works for it. And that's not an uncommon trait for people that do ESOPs.
And you couldn't highlight an important aspect of this any better, in my opinion. And that's that wealth, lots of wealth in the hands of people with good intentions and clear vision and the right team around them can just be world changers. And so the type of person, this structure is so unique because it requires it to be the only person who can successfully utilize it is willing to give away the ownership. Not give it away, but you know what I mean. They're willing to take the ownership and place it in the hands of other people that they care about, that they care to see cared for, and shepherded properly. So, Rick, thank you so much for that story, and thanks for sharing where people can find you. And we'll have to do this again.
I appreciate it. You guys are great. And on closing, Zach, if you ever want another job, if you decide you want to get into the ESOP or the investment banking world, I've got a spot for you. So.
All right, we got to cut this off here because we're not losing Zach. So
appreciate you, Ted.
that offer of doing this again is retracted formally now. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day and a great rest of the week.
Rick, thanks so much.
Take care.
All right.